How's it going, everybody? Adrian here, and welcome back to the Weekend Variety Show for Saturday, July the 31st. My friends, I hope you're having a tremendous weekend, and today I'm going to tell you about a video game I played called Last Stop. Now, originally I was planning on making this a actually full-length YouTube video, and that ended up running its course, so instead I'm going to tell you about it on this weekend show. Now, my basic concept for the video that I was going to make was that this game, Last Stop, is really more like a movie than a video game. You're probably familiar with the genre. We might call it like an interactive experience or a graphic adventure or something like that. It's along the lines of Telltale or Life is Strange. So in fact, there's 3 different individual stories which take place in this game, all with their own protagonists. They take place over the course of 6 chapters, except the 6th chapter actually brings all of the stories together. I will say if you're a fan of these games, I would recommend it. It's certainly not the best one I've played, but very entertaining. And like I was saying, it almost feels like, you're just there to watch a movie instead of actually play a game. The interactivity of the game is actually quite limited. You do some moving around, and the hallmark of the genre, which is to choose your own dialogue along the way, and then a QTE every now and then. And one way that it actually attempts to mitigate some of the low-touch moments of this game is actually by accentuating the things that you might see in a movie. For example, cinematography. I would say in a video game, cinematography is important, but is not always necessarily the focus of a game designer, especially if, the player is the one that's in control of the camera. But in this case, they did some really interesting things. There's a lot of moments in the game where you're just having to move from point A to point B. You might be listening to some dialogue. But really what makes those moments so interesting is that they will take the camera and just totally pan it out. And they'll show you the city that you're running around in, and really just makes it something worth watching. They also do some more wackier things. Like in one of the stories, there's these 3 characters talking about planning to get a job. One of them has a job interview, and they are collectively making a game plan. And instead of this just being a regular conversation between characters, they actually end up evoking like an overdramatic heist movie. They have the camera swiveling around the characters sitting around a table, with a spotlight just blinding the rest of the room. It's very comedic, it's very fun, not really something you would always see in video games. Another aspect of the game which I think really contributes to this cinematic experience is its soundtrack. Now, again, I don't think it does anything completely revolutionary, especially in terms of video games, but in these moments where interactivity was low, the atmosphere was kind of driven by music. And here, I'll actually give you the opening credits song for one of the 3 stories. And through this sequence, the character is literally just moving, again, from point A to point B, but it's an interesting sequence because the song is a bop. Here it is. Now, this is just one segment of the song. Obviously, it's much longer than that, but anyway, some of the music in this game is tremendous, and some of the underlying atmospheric stuff was extremely well done, especially for some of the creepier moments of the game. The last thing I want to talk about is the game's narrative, because unlike most of these, again, graphic adventure games, Last Stop is really not afraid to say, hey, we have a story to tell, and we're going to tell it, you're just here for the ride. I think something that you'll hear a lot when you talk about these types of games is how the decisions you make throughout the game will either impact the end or, the journey that you go on. And for the most part, Last Stop doesn't do any of that. Someone like Telltale will have these branching paths where you'll have different interaction with characters or the story will change along the way, but for the most part, everybody's going to end up in the same spot. Last Stop has just one branch, from beginning to end, and then at the very end, they present each character with 2 different choices. I would say these choices were not particularly difficult to make. I think in my opinion, there was only kind of one logical choice. But they do give you multiple endings to work with. And because of this singular narrative, again, like I said, it kind of just felt like I had watched a movie. That I didn't have so much of an impact on the game, that I was just there for the journey. So anyway, those were my takeaways from Last Stop. Of course, I was limited by time, as I always am on this show, but if it sounds like your type of game, then please feel free to check it out. It's available on most platforms, and it is on the Xbox Game Pass. It's a pretty cheap game outside of that as well. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in today. We're going to be celebrating the 3-year anniversary of the Gaming Observer tomorrow, so please be sure to get in any comments or questions you might have for me, and I'll read them out on the show. You know where to do that. And so I'll be back with that tomorrow, back with the news on Monday, and until next time, happy gaming, everyone. It's the TGO After Show. Hello and welcome. Yeah, you remember I was talking about making a YouTube video? Well, this is what it was. I think there's a couple of reasons it failed. One of them is I don't know that the editing process for a video essay was all that exciting for me. I happily wrote the script and recorded the script, and then I sat down to edit it, and I don't know, I just didn't, it didn't vibe. But the other part of that is it might have had something to do with the fact that I wasn't entirely happy with the script either, because, I don't know, I told you the reason why I started making that video was because I just wanted to make something. I didn't really care about the quality or that I actually had anything special to say, I just wanted to say something. And then I recorded the script and I did it all, and I went, well, I don't know that what I'm saying is particularly insightful here. Like, it's great for a show like this where I can come on and be like, hey, here's this cool game with this unique aspect, and here's what I took away from it. But making a whole YouTube, long video about it, there just wasn't any substance there. I spent more time introducing the game than actually talking about the interesting things about it. So, anyway, I'm glad that I went through the process and tried it at least, and maybe I'll try again in the future if I feel like I have something to say. But as it stands, I think this is what my output is going to be. And I think there's some interesting takeaways here. One of them is I should just push myself to try some new games more often and then come on the show and talk about them. Even if I don't finish it, I think if I can find some kind of interesting slant to introduce the game and talk about the game, like in this case it's video games as a movie, then I think that makes for an interesting show, and it pushes me to expand my horizons with video games. I'm glad I played it. I'm very glad I played it. And if you like those types of games, you should play it as well. It's not what you would expect. The whole premise is that, I mean, I didn't really detail this in the show, but the premise is that you're seeing ordinary people with extraordinary circumstances, almost unbelievable circumstances. And okay, I'll say a little bit more. If you watch the trailer, they would say this, so I'm not going to say I'm spoiling anything here, but there's some supernatural elements to it. And so one of the stories is extremely comedic. It's all about these two guys who have their bodies swapped. Again, that happens at the very beginning of their story, so it's not a major spoiler. And it's just like a very funny story. Like, the two characters are hilarious. The music that they play and the dialogue and everything, it's so good. And then they have this very different story with one of the characters that's, I guess if any of them you would call a thriller, it would be this one. It's about a teenage girl. And it's very mysterious and very tonally different. And then the third story is about a middle-aged woman, or maybe she's in her 40s, who is discontent with her family. And this one especially is very much like a slice of life, like the other ones are funky and different and wacky, and this one is just telling the story of a woman. And then it's not until the very end that she gets involved in the wackiness. And so they tackled all these very different tones of a game quite effectively, I would say, and I think it was a great game, and I don't know, I would encourage you to check it out. It definitely had its flaws. Like, there were moments in the game that were kind of slow and low input, and once I made the shift in my brain of being like, oh, just treat this like a movie, then it was fine. But any video game that does stuff like that, I always struggle with because I'm an impatient guy. And I think you can definitely find flaws in the story as well. The concepts were very good, and there was some great execution on many different levels, but I would say the storytelling of a Telltale or a Life is Strange is very much stronger. But it's not like you're going to waste your time. I mean, the game is 6 hours long or something like that, and it's a good time. Anyway, folks, that's all I got for you now. I'm going to be back tomorrow with the 3-year anniversary celebration. Very exciting. And I'll be back with it then. Ciao.